Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind troubled with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems, the ones you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve while rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Let my voice wash over you at a comfortable volume and allow yourself to be distracted from the stresses and worries that play on your mind. Whether you need help falling asleep or going back to sleep in the middle of the night, you can trust me to keep you company and help you to wake up tomorrow in a rested state. You may need to try out Sleepy Time Tales for a few nights to get used to the slightly strange idea, but I believe it will be well worth your while. Because I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So settle down, relax, and allow yourself to get lost in my telling of tonight's story. Before we get to the story, I'd like to take a few more minutes of your time. If you're finding Sleepy Time Tales useful, to help you to get a restful night, and you would like to keep it going out to thousands of insomniacs just like you, and you have the means to help me out, to help me keep it going, please consider supporting it on the Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimetales. This is monthly support that not only helps me keep the lights on, but can get you fun bonuses based on your contribution level. From as little as $2 a month, you get weekly access to early release on the main episodes, so that you get your fresh sleep aid on a Wednesday instead of a Sunday. And $5 gets you weekly bonus minisodes, special edits, and a monthly megasode, which is all the month's releases in one big listen. And times are tough, so maybe a monthly commitment is a little bit much. In that case, you can make once-off tips to the tip jar on the website. I've spoken recently about the struggles to keep Sleepy Time Tales going as support had fallen off, so I'm very grateful to the listeners who have stepped up and either joined the Patreon or thrown something in the tip jar. So thanks very much to everybody who has helped out. And to emphasize, if you can't afford to make any contributions, please don't feel guilty about it. Times are tough. I understand this very well. But if you'd like to support the show without having to put your hands in your pockets, just tell people about it. If you knew someone who's struggling to sleep and you think I can help them, just let them know. That's really all that it takes. And that's enough of that for tonight. Thank you very much. This week we return to General Instructions for the Guidance of Post Office Inspectors in the Dominion of Canada by Alexander Campbell. Chapter 10. Contracts for Mail Services. For every mail service there should be a written contract or memorandum of agreement, which should be made out and executed in triplicate. One copy being for the department at Ottawa, one for the contractor, and one for yourself. All contracts for mail services should be made so as to terminate at the end of a quarter, or if that is not possible, at the end of a month. The contracts terminating at the end of each quarter should be entered in the record of expiration of contracts, a page or 2 pages in this book, as may be required, being appropriated for each quarter. 6 months previous to the expiration of the contracts, the usual printed circular should be issued to the postmaster at each of the termini of the several routes, asking whether any improvements can be made in the service. Should any change be desirable, a report should be made thereon to the Postmaster General, at least 1 month previous to the preparation of the notices inviting tenders for a new contract. 4 months before the expiration of each quarter, separate reports should be made to the Postmaster General of all contracts expiring at the end of the next ensuing quarter in which no change of mail service is proposed, of all contracts expiring at the end of the next ensuing quarter in which an alteration is recommended. These reports should be accompanied by the usual notices of advertisement inviting tenders. All advertisements for tenders and all contracts for mail services should be carefully prepared, it being borne in mind that nothing more than what is expressed therein can be legally enforced. The advertisements should be dated a fortnight later than the date of their transmission to the department. There should be at least 6 weeks between the date of the advertisements and the date up to which tenders for the service are receivable, and at least 8 weeks between the day fixed on for the reception of tenders and the date on which they are to take effect. Duplicates of the notices inviting tenders for mail services should be filed in the guard book provided for that purpose. When the notices have received the approval of the Postmaster General, 1 copy at least should be sent to each office en route to be advertised, to be posted up in a conspicuous place in the office for the public information, and as many copies as may be considered necessary to the office at each terminus. The usual forms of tender should also be supplied to postmasters at those places where these forms of tender will probably be inquired for by any parties proposing for the service. Unless there is any good and sufficient objection, contracts for mail services must be made with parties whose tenders, being the lowest, have been accepted. It should, however, be ascertained that the party proposing to undertake the service is able satisfactorily to perform it, and that the sureties he names are good and sufficient for the penalty of the required bond. In the event of there being any serious objection to entering into a contract with the parties whose tenders have been accepted, full particulars of the objection should at once be reported to the Postmaster General. An application made for the next lowest tender. Full particulars should also be promptly furnished to the Postmaster General of action taken on tenders forwarded to you for acceptance on certain conditions, or in cases where none of the tenders received have been accepted in consequence of the high prices demanded. In dealing with accepted tenders for mail services and in making out the contract therefore, the greatest possible promptness should be observed. Contracts for mail services should be very carefully prepared, and no contract should be forwarded for the signature of the Postmaster General and is correct in all its terms and provisions. The contract should specify all the offices served en route. The contract sent for the Postmaster General's signature must be accompanied by the printed form or letter, in which should be entered appropriately and alphabetically contracts entered into without change of service, contracts for new services. Against each contract should be entered the number and date of the letter under authority of which the contract was made. Against the entry of each new contract it should be clearly stated whether the service is an entirely new one. If not, the names of the contract or contracts which it supersedes should be given. Every contract made upon an accepted tender should, when sent to the department, be accompanied by the tender on which it is based. Chapter 11. Bonds. Bonds must be taken from the following offices: postmasters, assistant postmasters in city offices, money order savings bank and registration clerks in city offices, railway mail clerks, and letter carriers. The amount of penalty of the bond required from postmasters must be governed by the revenue collected, and the amount of business transacted. Care must be taken to use the money order form of bond for all postmasters transacting money order and savings bank business. A postmaster's bond should in all cases be completed before he is placed in charge of the office. The amount of the penalty of the bond required from postmaster and city office is from $1,000 to $1,600. From money order and registration clerks in city offices, from according to amount responsibility, $1,000. From railway mail clerks, $800. From letter carriers, $400. Bonds can be accepted either from the Canada Guarantee Company or from 2 private parties whose sufficiency for the penalty must be certified by a magistrate. Bonds from the Guarantee Company are preferred. Great care must be taken in the filling up and execution of the bonds. The names in the body of the bond must be spelt in the same way as they are in the signature. In the description of the residence of the parties, the name of the judicial, and not the name of the electoral, county must be inserted. All erasures and corrections should be avoided, but if made, should be initialed by the parties whose signatures as witnesses are attached to the bond. The bond should be sealed. The signature of the principal and the sureties should in every case be witnessed by two persons. The witnesses should always sign their names. Marks as substitutes for signatures of witnesses cannot be accepted. If, as sometimes it happens, through the removal of an office, the township mentioned in the new bond as the residence of the postmaster differs from the township in which the office is situated, as shown in the postal guide, a special report of the fact should be made to the Postmaster General. Chapter 12. Railway Mail Service. This is a very important branch of the postal service and will require your constant supervision. A distribution book should be supplied the mail clerks on each road, which should be corrected at least once in each month, or oftener, should circumstances render it necessary. Each mail clerk in your division should be examined frequently with the object of ascertaining if he has a proper knowledge of the distribution and of the changes which have taken place in the distribution on the railway on which he is employed. On every railway route there should be a time-bill, which should pass from one end of the line to the other, and in which should be entered the particulars of all bags received and delivered by the mail clerks. You are not authorized to issue passes for traveling in a postal car except to a railway mail clerk actually going on duty. No person accepting railway mail clerks on duty, the conductor of the train in the ordinary course of his duty, and the post office inspectors should be allowed access to the postal cars while en route with the mails. You should make yourself acquainted with the conduct of the railway mail clerks when off as well as on duty, and report to the Postmaster General any railway mail clerk who, to your knowledge, is at any time under the influence of liquor or otherwise misconducting himself. Compensation is made to railway companies for mail service performed in a postal car, at the rate of 6 cents per mile actually travelled by mixed trains, and 8 cents per mile for quick passenger trains. Compensation is also made for the conveyance of bags in charge of the company's servants at a rate of from 2 to 4 cents per mile actually travelled by the trains performing such service. When service by postal cars is necessary, the companies are bound to furnish travelling post offices suitably fitted up, and to see what they are properly heated, lighted and cleaned, and supplied with water. All plans for the fitting of these travelling post offices should, previous to be carrying out, be submitted to the approval of the Postmaster General. No promise of remuneration for services performed in connection with the postal service should be made to any person in the employ of a rail company. For all such services, compensation is made to the company in the regular allowance paid to them. Canvas bags, as a general rule, should be used for the railway mail service. The necessary supplies will be furnished on application to the Postmaster General. 13. Circulation or distribution. On the correct distribution of mail matter greatly depends the efficiency of the postal service, and this is therefore a point which requires your constant and careful supervision. As a general rule, all offices between which pass large numbers of letters and papers should exchange direct mails, and the termini of routes should be constituted forward or distributing offices. Each distribution book or list should be prepared on a uniform plan. Books and forms for manuscript distribution lists can be obtained on application to the Secretary. You should see that all the railway mail clerks and such postmasters as require them are furnished with proper distribution books, and that these books are from time to time revised and corrected. All changes in the distribution in your division should be recorded in a book kept for that purpose, and from this book the necessary corrections in the several distribution lists effected should be made. Changes in the distribution affecting offices and other divisions should be at once communicated to the inspectors for the divisions in which the offices are situated. Postmaster and railway mail clerks should be instructed at once to report to you any errors in the distributions which may come under their observation, and prompt steps should be taken for prevention of the repetition. When a mail clerk or postmaster has a large number of letters for any particular office with which he does not exchange direct mails, he should tie them all up in one package, either addressing the package or facing the top and bottom letters outwards. Provision should in all cases be made for the direct transmission of letters and papers between offices on the same route. 14. Travelling. Visit and inspect each money order and savings bank office in your division, and make report thereon to the Postmaster General on the printed forms, as often as occasion serves, but at least once every year. Visit and inspect every other office in your division, as often as circumstances permit. Do not, unless with good and sufficient reason, pass the post office without calling in and inspecting it. Keep before you a memorandum of cases requiring personal investigation, so that in travelling you may be able to attend to as many of these cases as may be in the direction of your journey. In travelling is certain, as far as you are able, if the service on the several routes on which you pass is in every respect satisfactorily performed, and make memoranda in your pocket memorandum book of any irregularities which you may observe, or of any changes which you may think desirable. Note and take down particulars of any locality at which it is likely a post office may be required, so that when applied for, you may be able to report thereon. In visiting a post office, the following points should engage your attention. Is the office provided with a sign, a letterbox, pigeonholes for letters and papers for delivery and dispatch, other necessary things, forms and other necessary equipment? Is it conveniently situated and provided with proper accommodation for the public? Are the postmaster and his assistants duly sworn, and do they understand their duties? Has the postmaster proper stamps and material for postmarking letters, etc., and obliterating the stamps thereon? Are the letter bills properly postmarked and filed? Are the registered letters and mail key kept in a safe place? Are the letters and papers for delivery properly postmarked? Are they all intended for the delivery of the office? Are they sorted into the proper boxes? Are there any which should have been sent to the dead letter office? Are the newspapers for delivery all sorted in their proper pigeonholes? Are all letters and papers posted for dispatch as well as for delivery at the post office properly prepaid by stamp? Are the entries in the book of mail sent and received, and the registered letter books properly made? Are the instructions and circulars received from the department properly filed? Are the notices sent for exhibition to the public properly posted? Is there a notice posted in the lobby indicating the office hours and the times at which mails are closed and received? Is the postmaster supplied with postage stamps sufficient to meet the requirements of the public? Are the mails regularly received and dispatched, and the provisions of the contracts under which the office is supplied properly carried out? In the event of the office being a money order office, ascertain if the entries in all books are properly made, whether the cash book at offices where a cash book is kept up to date, and whether the date of the deposit receipts agree with the date on which the credits are taken therefore, whether the postmaster has in hand the balance due on money order account, whether all the numbers of the money orders taken from the order book are properly accounted for. You should take every opportunity of ascertaining and noting down the character and standing of the several parties employed in the postal service. The information thus obtained may be of value. You should also take every opportunity of collecting accurate information in regard to the settlement of the country, the position of post offices, roads and distances, And with this object you should carry a map of the section of the country through which you pass, and mark thereon as much as you can of the above information. 15. Cases of loss or abstraction. All cases of alleged loss of mails or letters or of abstraction of money or articles of value from letters should be promptly and thoroughly investigated. The circumstances attending those cases is so various that it is difficult to lay down any specific rule as to the mode in which the investigation should be conducted. This must be left to the judgment of the inspector. The following course, however, may be taken in ordinary cases. The printed form of question should be filled up by the applicant in each case. The applicant cannot supply all the particulars required, as they should be obtained from such parties as may be able to furnish them. A tracer should be filled up and sent to the office at which the letter was posted. The particulars of the cases should at once be entered into the book for the record of applications for lost letters. The papers connected with each case should be enclosed in a printed missing letter envelope. This should be docketed, the date on which and the name of the office to which the tracer was dispatched entered thereon, and placed in a pigeonhole appropriated to missing letter cases awaiting answers. The prompt return of the tracer must in all cases be insisted on. On no account should its unnecessary detention at any office be permitted. If on return of the tracer it is shown that no losses occurred, the applicant should be so informed. A memorandum to that effect written on the envelope in which the papers are enclosed, the papers put away among cases of application for letters which have been found, and the entry of the case in the record of applications for lost letters scored out with a blue pencil. If it is found that a loss has actually taken place, the names of all the offices through which the letter passed, or should have passed, should be carefully recorded in the book of record of applications for missing letters. These offices should then be carefully indexed, and a minute examination made with the object of ascertaining whether any of the offices through which the letter passed, or should have passed, appears with unusual frequency in other cases of loss, and whether in such an event there is any reason, either from the resemblance in the character of the losses, or the circumstances attending them, to suspect that the losses may be attributable to the same office. In the event of frequency of loss at a city post office, it should be ascertained through whose hands the missing letter would pass, and an endeavor should be made in this way to concentrate several losses on the guilty party. It is a well-established fact that a person who has once committed theft will continue to steal, and a concentration of cases of loss, in the manner pointed out, will certainly afford a clue to his detection. Commencing each month, number each office consecutively, as it appears in the record of cases of loss or abstraction. This will show, first, the number of cases which have occurred at any particular office during the month, and second, in each case the relative number of cases affecting each of the offices through which any lost letter, or letter from which an abstraction has been effected, has or should be passed. It should be borne in mind that losses or abstractions may have occurred previous to the posting of the letters, or after their delivery, and that the occurrence of two or more cases applicable to the same party posting or receiving letters is sufficient, at any rate, to awaken suspicion that the loss may not have taken place in the transit of the letters through the post office. In cases of abstraction, it is very important that both the cover and the letter from which the alleged abstraction has taken place should be obtained. A very careful and minute examination thereof will, in many cases, enable the inspector to determine whether any abstraction has really occurred, or if it has occurred, to narrow the suspicion down to the office where it has actually been committed. Examine the flap of the letter, if necessary, by means of a magnifying glass, and ascertain if it shows the least sign of having been opened and refastened, either by slight tears in the paper, marks of dirt or moisture, or the application of additional mucilage. Weigh the letter with its alleged contents and see if the weight corresponds with the amount of postage paid on the letter. Carefully examine the postmarks. If the impressions or indentations have penetrated from the cover to the letter inside, ascertain whether there's been any change in the position of the letter in the envelope between the time it received the postmark of one office and the time it received the postmark of another office. This will sometimes enable you to determine at which office the abstraction was effected. Ascertain if any of the postmarks have penetrated through the envelope from one side of the letter to the other. In such a case, you may be able to determine whether at the time the letter was stamped at any particular office, it actually contained an enclosure. Cases of alleged abstraction have been brought into light in which it has been proved that paper has been enclosed in letters by the senders, instead of the money purported to have been remitted. The proof consisted of the impressions of the postmarks placed on the letter at the office, at which posted having gone through the envelope onto the papers enclosed. It is of course important to ascertain whether the stamps were placed on the letter at the time it was posted. Cases of alleged theft have also been brought to light by the writing on the envelope being in a different hand to the writing in the letter enclosed, by the date of the letter not corresponding with the date of the postmark of the office at which mailed, and by the dates of the postmarks on the letter showing it had been subjected to some unusual delay. All these points should therefore be closely looked into. In all cases, it would be desirable to ascertain at what point the best opportunity for the alleged theft would have been afforded. The evidence in each case of inquiry should be carefully taken down in writing, and every circumstance, however trifling, which may in the slightest degree bear on the case noted. It is frequently by a collection of apparently unimportant facts that important results are arrived at. Care should be taken in every case to avoid the formation of any opinion until all the facts which it is possible to obtain in regard to it are collected together. It is only from these facts, and from the character and antecedents of the parties who may have been concerned in the loss, and not from some suspicion unsupported by facts, that conclusions can with any safety be drawn. All serious cases of loss or abstraction should be at once specially reported to the Postmaster General, and the most prompt action taken thereon. In cases of ascertained loss or abstraction, the inspector for each division through which the letter passed should be furnished with full particulars thereof. When there is no moral doubt of guilt, it is desirable that the party suspected should be at once suspended from his duties. It is not advisable, however, to take criminal proceedings in cases of theft, unless there is a probability of such evidence being obtained as will secure a conviction of the guilty party. 16. Arrears and outstanding accounts. All outstanding accounts and arrears due from postmasters and ex-postmasters must be entered in the book provided for that purpose. This book should be divided into 3 parts. 1. For entry of arrears due from postmasters in office. 2. For entry of arrears due from ex-postmasters. And 3. For entry of names of officers which have failed to render their accounts. Prompt steps must be taken to obtain these outstanding accounts and arrears. Application should first be made to the postmaster or ex-postmaster to send them in. If he fails to do this within a reasonable time, say 2 weeks, a letter should be addressed to each of his sureties. If this produces no good result, a second application should be made to the sureties informing them that if by a certain day, say in 2 weeks' time, the accounts and arrears are not forwarded, the matter will be reported to the Postmaster General, who will probably order legal proceedings to be taken against them. If, after the expiration of the time given, the accounts and arrears are not paid, this result should be specially reported to the Postmaster General. In such case, it would be desirable to ascertain and report to the Postmaster General whether the postmaster and his sureties are good and sufficient for the amount of the arrears due. When the accounts and arrears are sent in, the entry in the arrears books should be raised in blue pencil. On no account should outstanding accounts and arrears be overlooked and neglected. In some cases, when the amounts involved are large, a personal visit may be necessary. 17. Conclusion. It is very important that each inspector should make himself thoroughly conversant with the foregoing regulations, and it will be the duty of the Chief Inspector, when visiting the several divisions, to ascertain whether these regulations are properly observed, and to report to the Postmaster General such deviations as may come under his notice. Alexander Campbell, Postmaster General, Ottawa, 1st of August, 1879. And we've come up rather short on this episode, so I'm going to move on to something new in a very similar vein. A general plan for mail communication by steam between Great Britain and the eastern and western parts of the world, by James McQueen. Also to Canton and Sydney, westward by the Pacific, to which are added geographical notices of the Isthmus of Panama, Nicaragua, etc., with charts, by James McQueen, Esquire. London, B. Fellows, Ludgate Street, 1838. Startling as the subject of connecting China and New South Wales with Great Britain through the West Indies may at first appear, both as regards time and expense, still few things are more practicable. The labor and expense of crossing the Isthmus of America, either by Panama or by Lake Nicaragua, by land conveyance, is trifling. With 8 steamboats, only 4 additional to the number already in the West Indies, added to the present sailing packet establishment, the whole plan for the Western world, extending it westward to China and New South Wales, can in the meantime, as the following pages will show you, be put into execution to the fullest extent, with a very great saving in time and with very great regularity. A water communication, moreover, will, I feel convinced, and at no distant day, be carried through the American Isthmus, say by Lake Nicaragua, when the sailing packets for the Pacific may run direct between Jamaica and Sydney, New South Wales, and Canton, China. In the estimate for the cost of steamboats to employed in the service proposed, I have been chiefly guided by, and adhere to, the statement made by that able and practical engineer, Mr. Napier of Glasgow, in his evidence to the Post Office Commissioners in 1836, that steamboats of 240 horsepower and 620 tons burthen could be furnished at from £24,000 to £25,000. At this rate, the total yearly cost of mail communications by the aid of steam, to every quarter which has been adverted to in the subsequent pages, will be as stated in the following brief summary. Reference number 1 shows the expenditure, keeping the Red Sea route confined to India only, and extending the communication to China and Sydney by the Pacific, from Panama or Alejo. Number 2, the expense confining the communication by the Cape of Good Hope to India only, and extending the communication to Canton, etc. across the Pacific as before. Number 3 shows the expenditure for the Western world, the work performed by steam in the West Indies, and steam from Falmouth to Fayal, with sailing packets for the remainder of the work, and the whole expense by extending sailing packets to China and Sydney westward across the Pacific, but limiting the communication by the Red Sea to India only. Lastly, number 4 shows the expenditure of the communications made in a similar way to number 3, limiting the conveyance by the Cape of Good Hope to India only. See also Appendix number 2, page 128. Number 1, Western World, £279,250. East Indies, etc., £128,850. Pacific, £63,000. Total, £471,100. Number 2, Western World, £279,250, East Indies, etc., £187,978, Pacific, £63,000. Number 3. Western world, £161,615, East Indies, etc., £128,850, Pacific, £63,000. Total, £353,465. Number 4. £161,615, East Indies, etc., £187,978, Pacific, £63,000. Total, £412,593. It is, however, to that portion connected with the Western world that the immediate and particular attention of yourself and the other members of Her Majesty's government is particularly requested. The other parts above alluded to may hereafter not be deemed unworthy of your consideration and the consideration of the public. Carried into effect in a decided manner and as speedily as the nature and extent of the machinery required will admit, it would produce great and lasting advantages to the British Empire and confer great honour upon the British government and the splendid post office establishment of this country. Permit me to observe that the speedy conveyance of mails outwards to any place is but a minor point gained, unless the returns are made regular and equally rapid, and so combined that while every place possible can be embraced in the line, no place shall obtain any undue advantage over any other. These points can never be lost sight of in planning or arranging any mail communication, but more especially a communication like at present proposed. No narrow or parsimonious views on the part of this great country ought to throw aside the plan particularly alluded to, or leave it to be taken up and split into divisions by parties, perhaps foreigners, who will then not only command the channels of British intelligence, but be enabled to demand what price they please for carrying a large and important portion of the commercial correspondence of this country. The public, moreover, can only repose implicit confidence in a mail conveyance under the direction and the responsibility of government. Further, it is scarcely necessary to point out, or to advert to, the immense advantages which the government of Great Britain would possess, in the event of hostilities, by having the command and direction of such a mighty and extensive steam power in communication, which would then enable them to forward to any point within its vast range dispatches, troops, and warlike stores. From Falmouth, letters might be at Sydney, New South Wales in 75, and at Canton, China in 78 days. By employing sailing packets only to cross the Pacific from the Isthmus of America. Letters from Falmouth by way of Barbados, Jamaica, and Chagres would be at Lima in 35 days. To give greater security to the mails and comfort and accommodation to passengers, etc., a class of sailing vessels rather larger than the generality of those at present employed in the West Indies ought to be engaged, and for this purpose a larger sum annually must be allowed to defray the expense. Some of those at present employed, such as the Cherub, may do, but sloops are too small for the service. It is only within these few months that our mail communication, and that very uncertain and irregular, has been commenced with the British Empire in Hindustan, containing 100 million of people. With the rapidly rising colonies in British America, containing 1,700,000 enterprising inhabitants, there is still but one ill-regulated mail conveyance, by a sailing packet, each month. Such a state of things is neither creditable nor safe to a country like Great Britain. The population of these colonies must be left far behind their neighbours in the United States in all commercial intelligence, and the interests of the former must consequently suffer greatly. The steamboats to be employed in the service contemplated, although of the high power mentioned, need not be of the same tonnage as vessels of an equal power which are built for the sole purpose of carrying goods. Consequently, a considerable expense in building the former will be saved. Mails never can be carried either with regularity or certainty in vessels, the chief object and dependence of which is to carry merchandise. The time which such vessels would require to procure, take in, and discharge cargoes would render punctuality and regularity, two things indispensably necessary in all mail communications, quite impracticable. Any attempt to resort to such a system, more especially in a quarter where steamers would have so many places to call at these will have in the West Indies, would throw everything into inextricable confusion. Steamboats carrying mails and passengers should be the mail coaches of the ocean, limited as mail coaches on land are to cargoes, and as near as possible to the tonnage pointed out in the following pages. The steamers to be employed in the service contemplated should also be built broad in the beam, of a light draught of water, and in speed, accommodation, and security must be such that no others of equal powers can surpass them. The liberality of Mr. John Arrowsmith, so well known for his geographical knowledge and geographical accuracy, has enabled me, without the labor of constructing it, to present to you and to the public the chart of the world, between 70 degrees north latitude and 60 degrees south latitude, on Mercator's projection, which accompanies the present sheets. On it I have laid down all the routes of both steamers and sailing packets, to every quarter of the world that has been adverted to, and further added a chart of the West Indies and of the Isthmus of America, drawn by myself and corrected by the latest authorities. The timid and the interested will throw every doubt upon the success of such an undertaking. What is going on in the world is the best answer to doubts and fears on this subject. What takes place in other quarters will take place in the quarters alluded to, namely, success where failure was anticipated. In a vast undertaking like the plan proposed, the interests of the government and the general interests of the public must be specially kept in view, and particularly attended to. By attending closely to these interests, the government will find that it is best and most effectually consults the interests of individuals, places, and communities. No partial or local interest or opposition, as may as in this, as in most other concerns appear, ought to be listened to. Any such opposition can only proceed from prejudice or ignorance or self-interest, and a little experience will satisfy the public, and convince even such opposition that the fact is so, and moreover, that in the arrangements proposed, no interest in any quarter has been neglected. I have the honour to be, Sir, your most obedient, humble servant, James McQueen. London, 14th of February, 1838. A general plan for the conveyance of mails by steam, etc., etc. Introduction. The conveyance of mails and dispatches from one place to another is of the utmost possible importance to individuals and to a country. The rapidity and regularity with which such communications can be made gives to every nation an influence, a command, and advantages such as scarcely anything else can give, and frequently extends even beyond the sphere of that influence and that command which the direct application of mere physical power can obtain to any government or people. Much as Great Britain has already done in this respect to connect and to communicate with the very extensive, valuable, and important foreign dependencies, still much more remains to be done to give her those advantages and that influence and that command which she might have, which she ought to have, which all her great interests require she should have, and which the power of steam, together with the late great improvements in machinery, can and ought, in a special manner, to secure unto her, her commerce, her power, and her people. In no quarters of the world could the application of the power and the improvements alluded to prove so advantageous to the commercial and the political interests of Great Britain as in the East Indies, in the West Indies, and in those places connected with these quarters, and also in all these countries and places which afford the safest and the speediest means of connecting the chain closely, which tends to enable her to communicate more frequently, more rapidly, and more regularly with those places, and at the same time all these quarters and her own possessions with the parent state. The object being a national one, it ought to be carried into effect by the nation, without reference to the mere question of pounds, shillings, and pence. That is, whether it is to become directly remunerating concern or not. While the important subject ought to be taken up in this manner by the government of Great Britain, it may be observed that the plan requisite, carried into effect in the most extensive manner, will certainly remunerate fully the government, or the individuals who may undertake the work, either on the general or on the more limited scale, but the higher, the more the scale is extended. In fact, unless the plan is carried into effect on an extensive scale, it will not prove a concern so remunerating as it would otherwise be, because it is only by communicating in different places in the line, within the sphere of communication, that a greater number, or rather a sufficient number, of letters and passengers can be obtained. And unless the communications are sufficiently frequent and regular, both letters and travellers will continue to find private traders and ships in general the quickest mode of proceeding on and getting to the end of their journey or to the place of their destination. The position of the United States in the Western world and the very extensive trade which these states carry on with every part of that quarter of the world, and indeed with every quarter of the world, gives the merchants of these states, constituted as the packet arrangements and communications of Great Britain with foreign parts are now, an opportunity of receiving earlier intelligence regarding the state of many important foreign markets than British merchants in general enjoy, except such as are immediately connected with establishments in the United States, and by which means both obtain decided advantages over the rest of the commercial community. This ought not to be the case in a great commercial country like Great Britain. It is a fact quite notorious that from almost every quarter of the Western world, the earliest intelligence is almost uniformly received through the United States. The whole correspondence of the important British provinces, the Canadas, comes through the States. It is also notorious that by means of our own commercial, marine, intelligence is generally received from many foreign countries earlier than by government packets. Indeed, it is not uncommon among merchants to return, unopened, to the post office, many letters and originals, they having previously received the duplicates by private merchant ships. Besides, it is well known that vast numbers of letters from Great Britain to foreign states are sent through the United States, because these go earlier to their place of destination. In these various ways, a great post office revenue is cut off, while the mercantile world are put to a great inconvenience and uncertainty. It is not befitting that the first commercial country in the world should remain dependent on the private ships of another commercial and rival state for the transmission of commercial correspondence. If such a deficient system is persevered in, the result will most infallibly be that the country which obtains and which can obtain the earliest commercial information will in time become the greatest and most prosperous commercial country. It is in fact quite impossible that the commercial interests of any country can ever compete with the commercial interests of another country, unless the one have equally rapid, frequent, and regular opportunities and means of correspondence and conveyance with the other. If the merchants of other countries have quicker and more frequent communications with any particular quarter of the world than the merchants of the United Kingdom have, it is obvious that the former will obtain a decided advantage over the latter in regulating and directing all commercial transactions. And I think I'm going to leave that there. This is a rather dry read, but if you're interested in picking it up, as usual, you can find it on Project Gutenberg at the link in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepytime Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to follow or subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. Good night and sweet dreams.